Hey everyone, this is Pastor Logan Hensley. I'm the Associate Pastor at Oakland City First General Baptist Church. And I'm so excited that you clicked on this video to worship with us today. In fact, I want you to take a few minutes just to worship through song by yourself or with your family. And if you decide that you want to worship at the end of this video and just watch it all the way through, go ahead and do that. Just make sure you take the opportunity to worship. So I'll see you soon. Welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed your worship time if you chose to pause your video and worship with us. Today we have a special guest. It's the wonderful, the beautiful, the amazing, the fantastic Chloe Mowry. This is my fiance.
Hey guys, so we just thought it would be kind of cool if we did more of a conversational devotion discussion type of a video. Just to change things up and get you guys a little more engaged.
Yeah, and another way that we thought would be maybe a more engaging way to do this, instead of posting the discussion questions in the description of the video, we're going to post them throughout the video. So when we want you to discuss a certain question, it will be after each verse. Then we ask that you pause your video. If you're in a small group or a family, discuss that question just for 3 minutes, and then come back and play the video again. We'll continue on with the next verse. If you're by yourself, just take 2 to 3 minutes to reflect on that question. But for now, let's just go ahead and head into scripture. We're going to read it all the way through, and then we'll start going deeper into each verse. So Psalm 139, reading from the Passion Translation. Lord, you know everything there is to know about me. You perceive my every movement of my heart and my soul, and you understand my every thought before it even enters my mind. You are so intimately aware of me, Lord. You read my heart like an open book, and you know all the words I'm about to speak before I even start a sentence. You know every step I will take before my journey even begins. You've gone into my future to prepare the way, and in kindness you follow behind me to spare me from the harm of my past. With your hand of love upon my life, you impart a blessing to me. This is just too wonderful, deep, and incomprehensible. Your understanding of me brings wonder and strength. So this section of Psalm 139 verses 1 through 6 talks about the omniscience of God. Now, an easy way to remember how to spell omniscience is omniscience.
You said smell.
Spell. That's how I spell it. Omniscience, but it's pronounced omniscience, and what it means is that God knows everything. And we see that in verse 1 from the very get-go. Verse 1 reads this. When King David wrote this, I imagine that he was just worshiping God, and he really just recognized that God just really knows everything about him. I mean, there's nowhere to hide. I don't know exactly where he was in his life when he wrote these words on his page for us to read years later, but I imagine that he just had this moment where he was like, man, you really do know everything about me. Chloe knows a lot about me. You know, she's learned a lot in the past over 2 years that we've known each other, but she doesn't know everything about me. But God does. You know, he's been there from every moment. He was with us in the beginning before we even went through anything, before we were even created. He knew everything about us and everything to know about you. You know, what's awesome about what King David said is that he could have very easily wrote on that page and been just as worshipful and said, Lord, you know everything there is to know about everything. but he didn't. He said me. Doesn't that make it like so personal? And he was just like, it's everything about me. You care so much about me. And I find that so amazing that David would be like, out of all the people in the world, you care about me. You care to know everything about me.
Yeah, and it's really reassuring too, I feel, because a lot of times we go out into the world, or we go to our friends or our family even, or even each other, and we feel like we have to put on like a front. Like, we have to present our best self. And we don't have to do that with God, because He knows everything. He knows literally everything. He knows every mood and every single activity you do, every thought in the day. So like, you don't have to put on a front with Him. You can be your just complete, like, genuine, raw self with God. And that's reassuring, and it's really nice, especially in the world that we live in today, where we feel like we have to be a certain way to be accepted. So that's really good. So we can go ahead and go to verse 2. Verse 2 reads, so David goes on to list all of the things that God knows about him. And the first thing that he lists is how God knows every movement of his heart and his soul. And you may think, like, what's your heart and what's your soul? What is that? And a few years back, somebody actually asked me, how's your heart and how's your soul? And I thought that was interesting. I asked them, I'm like, what does that mean? What does it mean to, like, how's your heart? What does that mean? And they told me your heart is your emotions, and that's how you feel. It's your anger and your happiness, your sadness. And your soul is your spirit. It's your connection with the Lord and how you're feeling in your walk. And just how you feel, just your whole self. And the fact that God knows our heart and our soul, that's so personal and that's so intimate, because He knows every single emotion we're feeling. He knows when we're having a roller coaster day. He knows when we're having terrible days and bad days. And He's there to hold us when we have those days. And He's there to get excited with us when we have the good days. And our soul, He knows our spirit, and so He knows when we need more of Him, and so He offers Himself to us, and we just have to take it. And He knows when our spirit's high, so then He's like, let me use you. And when David says you perceive every movement of your heart and soul, just think about that. He knows every movement of your heart and your soul. And He's always there for you, and no matter what state your heart or your soul is in. And then he goes on to say He understands my every thought before it even enters my mind. I don't even know half the thoughts I'm going to think. Sometimes it just comes out, or it just comes into my mind. But He knows what we're going to think. He knows how we are. He knows how we think about ourselves. Or I'm a person that's really hard on myself, so He knows what she's about to be mean to herself, or she's about to do this, and so I gotta be there for her. And He knows that. He knows, and He understands it. That's what David says. He understands my every thought. And that's so reassuring, because I feel like we go through life and we feel like we're the only person who knows how we feel, and we're the only person who knows what we're going through. And He understands. God understands. He's there, and He is willing to walk with you and help you through it. And the fact to know that I have someone who will always understand me, no matter what, that's just like a peace. It gives me so much peace. And that's amazing to me, how God knows my heart, my soul, and my mind, and I don't even have to tell Him that. He just knows.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome how, he knows all of that. And throughout this whole video, I think you're gonna keep hearing us say He knows. But He really does. He knows about you, and He knows your every movement of your heart and your soul, and He understands each of your thoughts before it even comes in your mind. And that's just, it's so amazing.
Yeah, and just because, like, He does know, He knows everything, but He still wants you to talk to Him about it. We're not saying, like, oh, He knows, so you don't gotta worry about it. Like, He still wants to talk to you. He still wants to talk it through and talk about it. And He wants you to get your emotions out. So just because it's like, oh, well, God knows, you still need to work through that. You may still need to find somebody to work through something with you, or to tell your exciting news with. But I feel like that's important to know too. Like, He knows, but He still wants you to express yourself, and He still wants you to tell Him out loud, like, I'm struggling, or I need you, or this is awesome, and thank you. Like, He wants that actual conversation and relationship too.
Yeah, and I think that's what David was trying to say too when he wrote these wrote these words on his page. You know, he was like, you know, in his head, he knows that God knows all of these things that he's written, yet he still writes it down and worships with it, and he still has that relationship with God. So let's go ahead and go. We're going to have our discussion question posted up there, and so take a few minutes just to pause, work through that discussion question, and then you'll see the next set of verses come up. It's going to be verses 3 through 4, and we'll start working through those. Verses 3 and 4, David writes that God is so intimately aware of him. I really like how he used the word intimate, because it's just personal. It's so like it's a connection with God like no other. And you know, he just keeps reiterating that God knows everything about him, that he's so aware of him. And then he says something that I really like. I really like how the Passion Translation writes this down. You read my heart like an open book. You know, when Chloe and I first started dating, I always told her that I'm a hard read, and it's hard to read me. And if you can read me well, it's because I let you. And I still hold true to that today, that I let you start to read me. But I think she's gotten pretty good, and she's getting close to reading me like an open book. But even with her, there's still like a closeness. You know, there's still things yet to uncover. And even as we go and we're preparing to get married eventually, there's just like there's more pages to be turned in our relationship. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing that it's like that, because, you know, our whole life together, we're going to be discovering new things. Every time that I talk to a couple that's been married, such as my parents, my aunt, and my uncle, you know, they're always talking about how they learn new things about their spouse each and every day. And I'm excited to have that with Chloe, but it's just so amazing that since God has already read our book, even though we haven't even read our book, you know, we're still flipping through the pages of our life, but God is like, I know your book. I've memorized the pages. I read it like an open book. And the fact that he knows the words that we're about to say before we even start the sentence. I mean, right now, he knows what I'm going to say. And he knows that I'm about to pause, just like that. But he knows the words that we're about to say before we even start a sentence. I just think that's so amazing. That just continues to reiterate the fact that he knows everything about us. And he has every line of our life, every line of our story, our book, memorized. He knows it. He knows it by heart.
Yeah, the part where he says you're intimately aware of me, you know, the intimacy, like it's a close connection, he knows everything. And it's detailed. It's not like it's just like he knows my favorite color is green and I like cats. Like he knows the deep and the down and dirty stuff to the very nitty-gritty part of us. It's detailed. It isn't just the surface. He gets in there and he knows everything. He knows, again. He does, and he takes time to do that with each and every one of us, to know everything that we felt that day in every part of ourselves. So 5 and 6 is where we're going to go next. It's so awesome how God goes into our future and he plans the whole thing out for us. And he knows exactly where he wants us to go. And we always stress and worry about our future or your kids' futures or where you're going to be in the next 10 years. And I got to pick a career, I got to pick a school, I have to do this and that. And we stress about how we're going to get from point A to B. And if we would just stop and listen, he would tell us and he would show us. And I've been guilty of that a lot. I always think I have to do stuff on my own and I have to plan it exactly, just every single detail. And if I would just stop, he would tell me and he would lead me. And of course we're going to make wrong choices because we're human and it's not going to go exactly how he probably imagined it, but he'll redirect and he'll get us back on track and he'll help us through that. So he plans our future and he directs us, and then he follows behind us. He goes before us to plan the future, but then he follows behind us to protect us from our past, and he does that out of kindness. And I really love how David worded that, because a lot of times we limit ourselves because we feel like we're inadequate because of our past. And we think, I can't do that because I used to be like this and no one is gonna understand, or I can't do this because I don't have the education, or I can't. And we limit ourselves from our old decisions or the people who we're not, or who we think we should be. And he comes behind us and he protects us from that, and he tries to stop those thoughts from coming in. They get in because we're human and Satan makes his way into our minds, but he protects us from that, and he stops us and he's like, no, you can do this. I've made you for this, and you're going to do it in your own unique way, not in a way we think we're supposed to do it, in the way God designed us to do it. And I just love that he protects us from that, because he doesn't want your old self to get in the way of who he wants you to be. And then he says, with your hand of love upon my life, you impart a blessing. And once we walk into that future and we trust that God's behind us to protect us, he gives you a blessing out of his genuine love. And that blessing is immeasurably more than you could have ever thought it was going to be. And it all just ties in together. He goes before and behind, and then he blesses. And I just think that's so awesome how he does that for us.
Yeah, I like what you said. You said that we sometimes limit ourselves from our past. And I think a lot of us do that. We remember our sins that we've done in the past. We remember our mistakes that we've made. And we allow those mistakes and those sins to define us. And maybe you, sitting there watching this, you feel like your past has defined you. Well, David is writing and he's like, God's gone before, but he's also gone, he's gone before you, but he also follows in behind and helps you not be limited by that past.
Mm-hmm. David had a past. Yeah. He had some stuff. So he didn't just say this. He's like, oh yeah, he knew. David did some stuff that he probably hated about himself, and he hated that he did that. But then he acknowledged it, and he realized that God doesn't care about that anymore. It's forgiven and it's forgotten. So just to kind of relate that more, because David was no different than you and me. Like, he was a human too, and he made mistakes. Some of the worst mistakes, maybe, that some people would say. But, I mean, he realized that he came behind him. And he's not just some holy person who was just writing this down. Like, he experienced this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, and in verse 6, David continues writing through this section, through this stanza, if you will. He says, this is just too wonderful, too deep, too incomprehensible. He can't even understand, and he's just so amazed and so in awe of God in this moment when he's worshiping him, he's praying to him, and he's like, man, it's just so crazy that you know everything about me. And I love how he ends this verse. Your understanding of me brings me wonder and strength. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I remind myself that God knows everything about me and he knows everything that I've done and that I will done, it kind of freaks me out. You know, like I'm kind of like, ooh, I don't know. I don't know about that. But for David, he's like, this understanding that you have of me, how deep it is, how amazing it is, it gives me wonder and strength. It makes him want to draw closer to God. You know, that's the wonder. But it also gives him strength. And maybe those moments when he is defining himself through his past, it gives him strength in that moment that he knows that God is behind him, right there with him. And he doesn't feel like he has to be as guilty maybe of his past, because he knows that he's forgiven. And he knows that God knows everything about him, that God is going to take care of him, and that God loves him. And that's how God knows everything about us, is that he loves us. So take this time and just the next few moments, go through this third discussion question.
Thanks for watching, guys. We hope that you got something out of it and that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you take this into your week and into your life, and that the Lord would just bless you beyond measure this week.
Also, make sure that you tune in next week. It will be posted at the exact same time. It's going to be us two again, and we'll be going through the next section, the next stanza of Psalm 139. But I want to say something to you. I want to make sure that you know that the Lord knows everything there is to know about you. He perceives the movement of your heart and your soul, and he understands your every thought before it even enters your mind. You know, the Lord is so intimately aware of you, and he reads your heart like an open book. And he knows the words that you're about to say before you even start a sentence. The Lord knows every step you will take before your journey even begins. He's gone into your future to prepare the way, and in his kindness, he follows behind you to spare you from the harm of your past. With his hand of love upon your life, he will impart a blessing to you. This is just too wonderful. It's too deep and it's too incomprehensible. And I hope that his understanding of you and your life, I hope that brings you wonder and strength.